Hey there, Goa fans. This is Mark, DJ Solitaire here with episode 74 of Retro Goa Explorations, my weekly series in which I present in every episode one of my favorite tracks from the 1990s Goa Trance psychedelic dance movement. So we are in the autumn 96 through to the summer of 97 period. When I was living in London, a really formative time when a lot of new producers were coming out of the woodwork, producing some very different sounds. So we had a lot of creativity at this time, and a lot of movement away from some of the hallmark sounds of the Goa trance sound. There's a lot of producers, as I named in a previous episode, who didn't like the term Goa trance, and I get it. And it was also really important to keep evolving the sounds. I think some evolution went great, some of it not as much, but that's another discussion. This track, however, is a fabulous one with two very well-known producers working together and creating quite a stormer. 148 BPM, I believe. It is really kicking. And I first heard this one at a party that Matsuri, Tsuyoshi's label, threw in London in October 1996. So this is about a month and a half after I had arrived. And it was a massive party called Zen Centricity. Kind of cool, right? Zen and eccentricity, right? A little throwback to the close Zen counters that Tristan Strat. Huge event. Now, again, I had just a month before been at the Liberty Science Center where there was that incredible Return to the Source event, right? When that Science Museum with this giant atrium, and it was just like, oh my God, this is deluxe. This is phenomenal. This is how I saw, trance going. And then a month later in London, Matsuri throws this unbelievable event with I mean massive. There was these, I remember this big spinning thing that was designed by Organics. The three Japanese artists I mentioned, them and Jun Sogabe, who passed away about a decade ago or so. The three fellows who were doing the graphic design for Mitsuri. So incredibly psychedelic stuff. And I remember this spinning installation that was quite high up and amazing visuals. I mean, it was a cavernous thing, thousands of people. Now, I had met Tsuyoshi for the first time, like to actually exchange words. I believe it was the first week, it was early in October 96. And he was playing in Brighton. I think it was the Zap Club. And I went down to Brighton for this, stayed with a friend who I knew from Montreal, and went. I think it was a 4 hour set or something. And it was fantastic, of course. And I think it was probably I'd heard him three times in Japan, then heard him in Return to the Source. This is how, like, the early years being able to count this. So that was four, then London, New York five, and then this was the sixth time then that I heard him. So I went to this party, and afterwards I introduced myself. I spoke to him in Japanese, and said "Otsukare deshita," which is the Japanese phrase for "you must be tired from working so hard." And so we had a little exchange then. So when I met him outside Zen Centricity, hey, how are you? How are you? And I was ushered in, which is a great thing because I kind of just went up to the side entrance and I totally missed. There was like a lineup like a mile long for people to get in, and I also met Allison there, who I had met at the first Return to the Source. She was Tsuyoshi's manager. She was working and a lot with Mitsuri. So we luckily managed to just get ushered in. I had my ticket, of course. Absolutely amazing, amazing event. And on the lineup as well were Hallucinogen and Chakra, who I would then meet up with in Paris when Tsuyoshi played there in January at that event that I went to. So, but this track comes from the hallucinogen part of the evening when Simon played this collaboration that he did with Dick Trevor that would be released on twisted vinyl. Perhaps the second one. I'll fill in the details once I do the fact check after filming. The Infernal Machine, and this one is the Loin Sleeps Tonight. Now I've already done the other side, the Loin King, which Tsuyoshi premiered in New York from Simon's dad, and he had written it that week. That was a solo track. And at this point, Dick and Simon, so it's Dick Trevor and Simon Posford, who were the Infernal Machine. But that first one was a solo production by Simon. And I think, my suspicion, and everybody's memory is a little bit hazy, but I think it makes sense, that Simon and Dick only had this track in the can, and it was like, a scorching track, and Simon had that solo track. So they decided to do that as a, make an Infernal Machine single, but Simon used his moniker Walter Ego as an alter ego for that track. And then for this one, it was Walter Ego and Muttley. Muttley being a dog that goes in a cartoon that was around in the, if not the 70s, then definitely also in the 80s. So Dick Trevor, his alter ego. So this track, I remember Simon playing, and I remember it specifically because of the introduction. So this is the first time I heard it, and the introduction features some old kind of radio song from, it sounds like 1920s or 30s kind of thing, very, very old school. And, everybody was looking around just saying, what is going on here? Because it then sort of morphs into these, really twisted, no pun intended, sounds, and then becomes a storming track. So it made an impression, to say the least. Really phenomenal track. And then the whole track itself is, of course, an absolute scorcher. So on that note, which might be an A flat, I'm not sure. On that note, we're going to get started with this track, The Loin Sleeps Tonight by Infernal Machine. So hear that. Sounds like radio sound, but a little outer spacey, and then and just imagine this dropping in a party at 2 in the morning.
Walk up to that kind policeman, the very first one you meet, and simply say, I've lost my way.
And then soon it starts to morph. So now it's like, remember I've talked about that cosmic kind of radio dial. So now it's like the station is changing from 1930s or 40s radio into something more psychedelic. Listen to the drive there. Some sounds that would become very noticeable hallucinogen, both the sounds and then the rhythm here. Just the drive. Love the level of that kick. Sort of cavernous echo. Those sounds. Hi-hats again. Just opening that upper frequency. Then just what energy, just explosive. And that really like uplifting, celebratory, exclamatory, and just explosive enthusiasm. And then you get this little darker undertone here. So it's quite a lot of yin and yang, right? That super high explosive stuff, and then that darker mysterious stuff here. Well, Dick and Simon. And these outer space noises. Radio interference as we're tuning into outer space. what can you say? I mean, it's just like the whole thing. You think it can't get higher, and then it does. And there's another round where this other amazing stuff kicks in. Listen to the interplay between those. Like an electric snake. And then all this atonal, completely otherworldly harmonic mishmash. Is that hallucinogen rhythm? What would really start coming out in his music at this time? Just listen to that really cool undertone here. Now, really amazingly shaped loop. It's just really like everything folding in on itself. And then the tonal stuff is going to come in on the next break here. This next one. Massive meltdown. That rhythm. While that growling comes up. Love how this gets quiet in a minute. I believe this comes from some Sulfurix project or track. I remember that there's an alternate mix that's largely based around this. And I remember the name Sulfurix, but I can't recall the context. But anyway, this is really driving in in. You get some of those previous patterns, right? That oscillating. Listen to the size of the kick now. Really boomy and echoey. And that triumphant drive. It's really my favorite part of the track, that exclamatory, explosive stuff. We've got that darker Sulfurix drive blended with it here. Great noodling here. There's going to be a last hurrah coming up with it shortly. Wonderful tension as these screeching sounds like the fabric of space being ripped open. last melodic riff. And this amazing fade that happens here. It just disappears into nothing. So yeah, the place was like sweat flying everywhere. I mean, it was really explosive. That that opening really stuck with me. I mean, it's how can you forget the first time that you hear that? Just that explosiveness. I mean, it was dropped right at the right time. He came on, Soshi played an opening set on the other stage. There was like two stages. I forget who was on earlier. But I remember Simon was on probably like 12, 1, 2, somewhere in there before Chakra. And then Yoshi played a closing set. But holy moly, it was, yeah, absolutely scorching. Still is really high power. It's really a shame that Simon and Dick didn't produce more tracks together. They did do the hallucinogen track, The Jiggle of the Sphinx, which had a different title initially. We'll get there when we get there. And the only other Infernal Machine track that they produced was the one that came out on Dementertainment in '98. Nocturnal Chainsaw Kerfuffle, which is another story, which I first heard November or so, '97. Another story coming with that, of course. But such a classic, absolutely rip-roaring time. And yeah, great one from the '96-'97 season. So this is the last episode before I head off to Europe for ZNA and Ozora. So not going to have any of this style of episode unless I film something over there. We'll see, but probably won't be time. Might be some other kind of video touch-in from Ground Zero. So I'll sign off for here, and I'll sign off here for now. And thank you for tuning in. I'm Mark, DJ Solitaire. Have yourselves a great festival season, and we'll see you sometime soon. And here you are now with the complete masterpiece by Infernal Machine, The Loin Sleeps Tonight.
Remember your name and address and telephone number too. Then if someday you lose your way, you'll know just what to do. Walk up to that kind policeman, the very first one you meet, and simply say, I've lost my way, I cannot find my street. But